headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV. I'm Phil Dave. Coming up.
We've got to get the message over that there are 20% of this country who are not vaccinated and are putting themselves at risk of dying from COVID. We have got
But
to
they're
get
not really, are they? I mean, statistically, most people are never going to die of COVID. What's it, 99.1%, whatever the figure is, are not going to die of COVID. And
Yes,
Omicron, even less so.
Oh, jabs, jabs and more jabs. That's all we ever seem to talk about. But what's better, though? Mandatory jabs for workers or save losing around 70,000 national health staff? Also,
you only have to look. If you're hiding the truth, that is why this government is in so
But you're
much
not
trouble.
hiding it, Lenny. It's published, but you're just not broadcasting it on the news every day. No, I'm saying, no, I'm not. No, Lenny, I'm not. I promise you, old chap. I'm saying don't put it out on the news every day.
are daily COVID figures a help or a hindrance? Oh goody, another COVID-related dilemma to get our heads around. That's one for Nick de Bois to tackle. Plus,
if we said, for example, the government passed a law that said no school drivers are allowed to carry a pistol on their side. That principle of personal autonomy versus the risk that they cause to somebody else, even if this person is absolutely peaceful, there's still that 1%, not 1% chance.
False equivalence. I'm sorry, it's a false equivalence. You are not asking me, by not carrying a pistol, to put something into my body. And that is different. That is different to carrying a pistol.
all that and more on Clashes of the Week. But first, the Health Secretary has decided to review plans for mandatory vaccinations for NHS staff. The scheme was due to be implemented by April. Around 77,000 NHS workers remain unvaccinated against COVID. Well, Ian Collins brought this up when he spoke with Dr. David Lloyd, a GP based in London, and Craig McKinlay, an MP for Thanet South. Clearly, given the superior knowledge that MPs seem to have over NHS staff about matters pertaining to a medical nature, maybe I'd better book a checkup with my local politician. Give me strength. Here's how it played out.
The deadline is looming here, Craig. It feels as if the Health Secretary might be about to make a reverse ferret on this. Are you sensing that?
I'm hoping that is the case. I mean, I must say I was half anticipating it this week. I mean, throughout this, when this statutory instrument was laid, I think back in November, mandating NHS workers to have a vaccination, I voted against it because of many reasons, not least I think people have a choice in life. I mean, that said, I'm a big proponent of vaccines. I think everybody should have them. And I do find it hard to believe that NHS workers wouldn't. But, that's a matter of choice. But if that was the solution to a problem back in November, I don't think it's the solution to the problem we have today, because we're in a different place. That was against Delta. We're now in an Omicron world. Of course, there will be other variants, and I expect some who are ill at the moment may still have Delta. But that was a solution to a problem of its day. It's not the solution to the problem we're facing now. The big problem we're facing now is potentially losing 80, 90, 100,000 frontline and health staff at a time when we've got 6 million people on waiting lists.
Yeah.
There's got to be another way, and that other way has to be a lateral flow test for those who don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, if I was a patient, let me put myself in the shoes of a patient, what would I prefer? Somebody who's triple vaxxed, but can still be carrying it, be ill with it, perhaps asymptomatic and all of that, because the vaccination, good as it is, it's good at stopping you from getting very ill, but it doesn't stop you from getting infected with this.
Yep.
I mean, how many people do you know that are currently down with Omicron? I know a number, all triple vaxxed. Or would I, as a patient, prefer that health professional to have had a negative LFT test that morning?
Yeah.
I would prefer the latter, because I have greater assurance that they are, clean and safe on that day that they're treating
and
me.
That's yeah. Well, I was sorry to interject, Craig. I was just about to say that's the most sort of baffling part of this, really. And I remember making the same argument when it came to whether you need to show proof of vaccination to go in a pub, for example, whereas a lateral flow test will absolutely tell you whether you've got it that day. Being double jabbed, triple jabbed 2 months ago, surely is not as effective as the lateral flow test.
Well, I think you've got it absolutely in one ear. And I mean, we know this vaccine is very good at keeping you out of hospital, keeping you away from serious illness. But it does wane over time. We know that. That's why we had to go up the booster route. So this isn't the salvation to stop you from getting COVID, because of all the examples of friends that I currently have who are down with COVID, not unwell particularly. Some have had a snuffles for a few days. But the fact is, we need frontline medical staff. We need to keep them in work. Even before COVID, we had a big shortage of staff. We had 50,000, 100,000 vacancies within the NHS. And here we are on the verge of saying, goodbye another 50 to 100,000 of them. This has got to be the wrong solution from where we are today. There are other solutions. And the lateral flow test, to me, seems like a fairly cheap and easy way of doing that. Now my worry is when we get through all this COVID period, it may be that the doctors, the very highly trained staff may come back. But there will be other staff, perhaps the junior nurses, might say, do you know what? I'm out of here. I lost my job. I'm not going back. I'm going to do something else in life. And those skills are lost for good. And that is my danger that we're staring down the barrel of now. And I've been urging the government to have a change of heart. I expected it this week, but we've got till the 3rd of February. I'm hoping it will come before that. But I know of certain health trusts are already discussing with their staff. I spoke to a specialist in a hospital just this week. He's been not vaccinated, had COVID. So I assume he's got some antibodies to this, but he hasn't been vaccinated for his own reasons. He's having discussions with his chief exec about his exit, and those discussions are happening now.
Listen, Craig, stay with us. Let's speak with Dr. David Lloyd, GP at the Ridgeway Surgery in Harrow. David, thanks for coming on with us. Always nice to speak. Do you think the Health Secretary needs to rethink this policy?
Well, my heart, my brain says no, please. This is a vitally important thing. You don't want to have your doctor, your nurse, your healthcare worker unvaccinated and potentially able to spread the disease while you're at your most vulnerable. Also, should you take advice from someone who hasn't been vaccinated? There is overwhelming scientific evidence that vaccines are going to get us out of this terrible, terrible epidemic, and it is getting us out of this terrible epidemic. And unless we can show by example that we've been vaccinated, I think there are real issues. There's
a concern, though, David, that the vaccine is doing very little when it comes to Omicron, and that you can still get it, you can still spread it, and therefore the booster program is really not doing very much in this respect. So it becomes a rather futile exercise.
On the contrary, the booster is the thing that is keeping us from getting the complications of Omicron. I spend my life talking to patients who haven't been vaccinated, and a few of them every day are going into hospital because they haven't had their booster vaccination. No, vaccination is key to getting us out of it. Yesterday, Moderna trialed the new Moderna vaccine, which is specifically designed for Omicron. Science and the vaccinations are going to get us out of this. And doctors and nurses who disagree with the science should not be working.
And when you say, are you not uncomfortable a bit, David, with the notion that you lose your job if you don't have a jab? I'm not purporting to know the answer, but I sort of sense I know what the answer isn't. And firing good clinicians and other staff because they don't want to have a mandated medical procedure.
So
smacks of all shades of wrong.
How did you feel about that picture of Dr. Stephen James standing next to those anti-vaxxers on Saturday? I mean, these are the sorts of messages that are now spreading because doctors and nurses are not getting vaccinated and are standing up with the anti-vaxxer brigade and making our lives much more difficult.
I mean, Craig, you heard what David has said there. How does that dovetail into your view with the let's get medics to have a lateral flow test instead if they are wary or hesitant about the jab?
Well, I mean, I didn't actually disagree with anything that Dr. David Lloyd has just said. I do find it somewhat unbelievable that people who work in frontline medical field do not want a vaccination. But, that is a matter for them. And I agree with David that those who, for whatever anti-vax reasons that I completely do not agree with, are encouraging others not to get vaccinated, I think is a very, very harmful step. If they don't want to get vaccinated, in my view, that's a personal, quiet choice of those. Where there is an alternative for an LFT, lateral flow test, I think the government would be well served by just shifting its policy at this late stage to say this is just as an effective and safe way of keeping patients safer. As I gave in my example, if I were a patient, I think I'd rather be treated by a doctor that had a lateral flow test negative that morning than somebody who was triple vaxxed.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I'd rather they had both, obviously, but I don't want to lose these frontline clinicians. And I think we would then be building up problems of cancer and all of those other issues that have been not been looked after.
Absolutely. And I think, indeed, I think we all agree on that point. David Lloyd, I mean, it's a good point from Craig, isn't it? Isn't the best compromise here a lateral flow test? That way you actually have, in some respects, a far more authentic reading of somebody's COVID status.
I agree with that as well. But don't forget, it's about principle. If you're being dealt with and looked after by someone who's not been vaccinated, it's not just about the act of treatment, but it's about saying something about the person you are. Why can't we have badges? I've been vaccinated, so should you. We've got to get the message over that there are 20% of this country who are not vaccinated and are putting themselves at risk of dying from COVID. We have got
But they're not really, are they? I mean, statistically, most people are never going to die of COVID. What's it, 99.1%, whatever the figure is, are not going to die of COVID. And Omicron, even less so.
You're a young man, and young people are not going to die of COVID. But old people with risk factors are dying every day. And those are the ones we've got to protect.
Craig?
No, I mean, again, I'm a proponent of vaccination. Younger people, I mean, we could have a big debate about, are we going up a sensible route of the 12-year-old plus? I've got my doubts, actually. But yeah, for older cohorts, yes, get vaccinated. I can't believe anybody who wouldn't. But I still maintain that we have got a new crisis in the NHS. I mean, we always seem to be in an NHS crisis, even before COVID. We are going to create a new crisis of losing a lot of clinicians at a time when we have got waiting lists bigger than we've probably seen in the history of the NHS. Why would we go up a route of making it worse when there is an alternative? I understand the bad messaging of clinicians not being vaccinated and all that. Yeah, I get that. But we have got a looming NHS staffing crisis, even worse than we've ever seen before. If there is an alternative solution, I would recommend we grab it and have these debates after the event.
And a final word, David Lloyd, on this. I mean, you mentioned about the protection that a vaccine and the booster will afford you. Is there anything about those scenes in other countries? I'm thinking in particular France and in Israel too, where we've had people triple jabbed, in some cases quadruply jabbed. Omicron cases seem to have penetrated all of that, not really made much of a difference. Deaths are down, but we still have a huge amount of people getting it, so it's not doing what it says on the tin.
People are getting it, but they're not dying from it, aren't they? That's the issue. That's why vaccine is so important. We're preventing people from dying. Don't forget, there are lots of other stories. I mean, I could go on, obviously, for hours and hours about this, and I do accept it is a nuanced thing. We don't want to lose thousands of health workers from frontline. And I'm not trying to say that there shouldn't be some sort of compromise about this, but we mustn't compromise on the message. Vaccinated people do not die, do not go into hospital from the Omicron virus.
This is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. The government is toying with the idea of ending the overemphasis of the daily COVID figures. This was brought up on Early Breakfast recently when Nick de Bois sat in for James Max. Nick opened the phone lines and asked you, how helpful are the daily COVID statistics? Lenny and Ashford clearly thought they were very helpful. Personally, I think they're only good for mass hysteria. Speaking of which, let's find out how this played out.
Let's go and take a call from Lenny. Hello, good morning to you, Lenny.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, and just time to fit you in, old chap, so what would you like to say?
Well, I totally disagree with you because there is no excuse or reason for anyone to hide the truth.
Yeah, but do we have to blurt it out every day, though?
Yes, totally. Because what it is, then when that truth comes out, we can then plan our lives. Because I plan my life subject to how the virus is acting.
Yeah, but hang on, Lenny. It's not about hiding them. It's about it being the lead news. If we got less people now dying than from, say, a flu epidemic, and the rate of infection is not that significant, and good GPs and doctors will be looking after the vulnerable people, why should we have it rammed down our throats every day, driving such fear in people who should have no real reason to fear it at all?
Well, the deaths are only a small part of it. I mean, what it is the like the long COVID.
Well, yeah, but the purport.
You know, they don't give the quote. They don't give the amount of people suffering from long COVID.
Well, that's because actually, in truth, they don't know. But there's regular data published who's most likely to suffer from it. And we're not going to know for years, Lenny. On that basis, you'll be saying for the next 3, 4, 5, even 10 years, we'll be publishing this data. Think of the cost it's doing to people's daily lives who are fearful of something because they don't fully appreciate that high transmission, i.e. lots of us can catch it, is not necessarily something to be frightened of.
Well, I have health issues and I want to know because that helps me to plan my life. Because, you know, you only have to look. If you're hiding the truth, that is why this government is in so
But you're
much
not
trouble.
hiding it, Lenny. It's published, but you're just not broadcasting it on the news every day. No, I'm saying no. I'm not. No, Lenny, I'm not. I promise you, old chap. I'm saying don't put it out on the news every day. We publish all sorts of data on the NHS, all sorts of conditions, deaths from coronary heart disease. You don't have that on the news. It's the biggest killer that we have generally in this country. I think So we don't publish that on the news. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, but I can't catch heart disease off of another person, but I can catch the virus.
And you may be able to catch the virus, but you can also catch flu, and you're more likely to die from flu, given the current numbers, Lenny.
This is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Now, in recent days, hundreds of articulated lorries, pickup trucks and cars descended on the city of Ottawa in Canada. This was in protest against vaccine mandates and lockdowns as well. 24 hours later, they had seized a part of the city in front of the Canadian Parliament. This was brought up on Christo's show recently when he invited political commentator with Young Voices UK, Portia Berry-Kilby, and political commentator and advocate of the election reform, Femi Olawale, to take part in Christo's council. Is the Canadian Prime Minister about as popular as a fox on a turkey farm right about now? Let's find out. Here's what happened.
Can you tell me, firstly, Femi, are they right? Are they right to be holding Ottawa and Canada to ransom over these anti-vaccine mandates and restrictions?
So you have to separate three things out. First of all, is it morally okay to not take the vaccine? On that principle, given that we know that vaccines cut the risk of transmission because it means you fight the disease faster and therefore are less likely to pass it on, that means that you can slow the transmission rates, which lower. And given that Canada is going through troubles in terms of hospital capacity and waiting lists, etc., it is a moral obligation, especially in light of the fact that there are countries around the world that don't have these vaccines and are waiting for them, and we're essentially hoarding them and not using them. So it's a moral obligation to actually take the vaccine. Second of all, is it practical and cost effective to use mandates to make this work? Now, with that, you've got to weigh up the risk of what they're suggesting potentially, because around about 90% of truckers in Canada are vaccinated. So you potentially risk about 16,000 truckers on the road versus the potential risk to the healthcare system and therefore the economy of allowing unvaccinated drivers to potentially spread the disease. Third thing is it right for them to protest? And on that principle, do they have the right to protest if they oppose something? Absolutely. And I think that's one of the issues that we're seeing in the UK.
Portia, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's morally right to take the vaccine, and because of the costs to the health service, they should do.
Well, we've seen that vaccines don't necessarily work. You can still pass on the virus and catch the virus if you are vaccinated. And if it's about the impact on the health service, it's not as though truckers are the most public-facing jobs. They sit in their trucks most of the days, back across the border, go to the bedrooms. They're not really, if they do catch COVID, they're not spreading it here, there, and everywhere. So this mandate is not going to achieve its goal. It's unjust, given that they could still catch COVID anyway. And
But Portia, is it right that you use the words "the vaccine doesn't work"? I understand that most people have the view that vaccines will eradicate something being transmitted, when in actual fact what's happening with this vaccine is that yes, you can still pass it on, but it will reduce the severity of the illness that you may get. So is it fair for you to characterise it as not working in that way?
Having a vaccine mandate doesn't work.
But you did say the vaccine doesn't work, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, it doesn't stop you from getting COVID. Yes, it reduces perhaps the severity of it in some cases, but I don't think you can use that to enforce
and the likelihood of passing it on. That's the crucial thing. Because you fight the disease faster. Because you fight the disease faster, you have the disease and you're transmissible for less time, which means you're less likely to pass it on. And given that we're dealing with in the UK 150 to 160,000 deaths, even if you reduce it by 10%, and we are talking about 63% reduction, even if it was just 10%, you're talking about saving thousands of lives.
Let's bring this though to what you would want, or what one would want the outcome of this sort of action to be. Now, if one who is in the government wants people to take the vaccine, I am very much in favour of that being happening through debate, through conversation, through information, rather than through coercion, mandates, freedoms being restricted, being told you can't do your job to cross the border as a lorry driver to do so, because ultimately that is not going to convince people to take the vaccine, and it's also an infringement on people's civil liberties. A lot of people who are on these marches or on these convoys have actually had the vaccine but object to the kind of restrictions around them. So it's not fair that we characterise this about sort of pro or anti-vaccine in general, right?
So with this, we're talking about the fact that if they're unvaccinated, they'll have to quarantine for 14 days. So what you were saying, Portia, about how we're not talking about truckers spreading the disease. We're talking about after they get back, having to quarantine to prevent them from going around and spreading the disease. That's what we're talking about here. And it's highly unlikely, though, that having got into the truck, delivered the goods, got back across the border again, they're not going to have had much time to pick up the disease anyway, vaccinated or otherwise. It's not proportionate. A trucker is one of the least publicly engaging roles with other people. They're fairly solitary time in the truck. And it also just shows the hypocrisy of introducing any form of vaccine mandates because it's so disproportionate to the situation. Yes, it might reduce the chance of hospitalization minimally, but at the end of the day, you have a choice and a right to decide what you do and do not put into your body. And that shouldn't be overridden for the sake of maybe saving a few more people from hospital.
Femi?
So yes, everybody has a choice as to what they take into their body. But for example, if you work, we all have the obligation. Well, sorry, doctors and nurses have an obligation to take certain vaccines in general, other than COVID, and so that's an obligation that you have. And if you have, and we all have rights which we have to abide by, and the rules we have to abide by in order to participate in society. You all have to have brakes in your cars, seatbelts in your cars. There are things we have to do to participate in society. This is one of them, especially given, as I said, there are countries around the world that don't have these vaccines. And by not using them now, not waiting another couple of years, and we've already had years of debate on this, by not having them now, we're depriving other countries.
But is there not a principle at stake here about what the state's role is? And I, for one, you'd have probably heard me saying this, I'm pro people taking the vaccine. I've had my 3 jabs myself, but I am extremely worried about the way in which the state is saying, look, we will decide what you can and can't do based on whether you have had this medical procedure. And I really worry about that. I really worry about the state deciding on those freedoms being given to you or not. And Femi, you must understand that principle, surely.
Well, let's fight to something else. If we said, for example, the government passed a law that said no school drivers are allowed to carry a pistol on their side. That principle of personal autonomy versus the risk that they cause to somebody else, even if this person is absolutely peaceful, there's still that 1%, 0.1% chance.
False equivalence. I'm sorry, it's a false equivalence. You are not asking me, by not carrying a pistol, to put something into my body, and that is different. That is different to carrying a pistol. This is something where you're saying to me, inject myself with something. Now, it's something that I happen to agree that people should be injected with, but it's body autonomy.
And that applies to doctors who have to take several vaccines in order to practice medicine in the NHS because of the principle of it. If you are in that job, there is a heightened risk. And yes, truck drivers tend to be quite solitary. But then they go to the other country. They'll have to stay in a hostel with other truck drivers, and it's just a massive cross pollination.
All right, Portia, what do you say to the principle of the state deciding on these things based on what you put in your body and those freedoms?
Well, it's entirely unjust. There's a chance that it minimises the health risk you pose to others. That is not a reason sufficient for the state to overreach and enforce or basically coerce you into having a vaccine.
Two things. One, we are talking about 160,000 deaths in the UK. That's what we're dealing with. So we're not talking about, it's just a minor inconvenience. It's too much of an inconvenience. People died in their thousands and are continuing to die. About 2 days ago, we had the highest death toll since last February with 436 deaths. Not to mention, if you are on this side, because the topic of this debate is, are they right to protest?
Yeah.
If you think they're right to protest, I'm curious, Portia, what's your view on the policing bill? Because this protest would be banned under this, because it would put people nearby at risk of feeling, quote unquote, serious unease, as, for example, the Prime Minister is definitely feeling uneasy. If you support this government, who are looking to ban precisely this sort of thing,
all right,
you can't support these protests.
We've got to move on after this, so let Portia answer.
Well, I think that particular bill that's domestic policy. This is talking about truck drivers in Canada and vaccine mandates more broadly. My views on that bill. Well, I think people have the right to protest. I don't support everything the government introduces in every single bill. And I think that, if anything, this proves the importance of the right to protest on something so pertinent to your life as to what you can and not put into it.
All right.
And the ability to continue your job and your livelihood to your refusal at a vaccine, which to you might have very little added benefit.
This is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Now, the cost of housing asylum seekers comes in at around £5 million per day. The Home Secretary, Pretti Patel, has revealed that migrants are having to be kept in hotels due to a lack of social housing. Well, this was brought up on Ian Collins' show. He spoke with Dr. S. Chalvin, Head of Immigration and Public Law at 33 Bedford Road Chambers. And yet, I can't get onto the housing ladder due to a broken lending system. My, this country is mightily frustrating when it wants to be. Shall we find out what happened?
Nice to have you with us. £5 million a day. That can't go on, can it?
Look, let's look at the facts underlying the statistic or the monetary value. We know that in late August, the UK moved Afghans through Operation Pitting or the Arab Scheme to the UK. We recognise that these individuals were at risk of persecution, of harm because of the Taliban. What are they doing in the hostels? What are they doing in the hostels many months later? The Times article you quoted this morning says 12,000 Afghans in hostels. So why are they costing the British public this money? Because they haven't been granted refugee status to enable them to go into the community, to start gaining employment, to be able to work. So the issue really here is not why are Afghans costing us funds for the Home Office in relation to 12,000 hostels, is why is the Home Office not granting these individuals refugee status so therefore they can actually go into the communities and fend for themselves and support their families.
Yeah, most of course.
That's the issue.
The smart money would suggest, Chauvin, that most of those people, even if they were processed fully and given more permanent accommodation, would still be under the umbrella of the welfare system. I say that not as a pejorative, just as a basic observation. So there would still be a not dissimilar cost.
There's no basis for you to say that. I mean, the first thing is the fact that
what do you think, seriously?
Home Secretary is running an argument saying that asylum seekers are costing us money to be able to house. Well, they wouldn't be asylum seekers if they were refugees and granted refugee status. And the UK has already identified these individuals at risk, because otherwise we wouldn't have moved them from Afghanistan to the UK. Okay. So we know that the statistic is quite unfair. And one of the big issues here is that it's nothing to do with how much those seeking asylum are costing us in hospitals. It's about a change in policy, because the article talks about reception centres. Now, please forgive me, these are not it's not butlins. Yeah, these are detention centres used to process refugees. And importantly, we know about the abuse detainees face in these so-called reception centres. Just ask anybody who listens to the inquiry regarding the Brooks Centre in Gatwick, regarding the levels of abuse and harm detainees are subject to through the immigration process. So let's get very clear that it's about a change in culture to make the UK a hostile environment.
Right, okay. And I mean, you would say that, but there's record numbers of people. It might politically suit you to say that, Chauvin, but of course it isn't hostile.
No, it's not record numbers.
It's not a hostile environment at all, is it?
Does not take the number of refugee applicants our partners in Europe. That's always been a spin by the right-wing press in relation to trying to imagine that we are over.
I don't think anybody is suggesting it is the most in Europe, but it's still just the Channel migrants alone, 28,500 last year. You can't carry on that way.
And we know that the majority of these individuals, we spoke about it the last time I was on your programme.
Yep, they're processed. We have no idea. We have no idea whether these people are legitimate, have we?
The Home Office not being able.
Well, it's broken because you can't identify the person that comes over. Somebody hasn't got any papers. They tell a story. We have no idea where they came from.
Speaking as somebody who's practiced in this field
so
for
you will
over
know
20
this, then.
years, those people who are identified as operating deception or fraud are identified and not provided the usual channels in relation to refugee determination.
Okay,
so
how do you determine
there's no evidential
somebody,
basis?
No, there isn't, but there is a suggestion that actually, and Gary says here, granting asylum is the path of least resistance for the authorities, and that is absolutely spot on, isn't it? If you
with the greatest respect,
you speak to a border or a Home Office person.
So lots of my clients are waiting 2 years, 3 years from having made lawfully an application for asylum. They're still waiting to be interviewed. So where is the fault there? It's got nothing to do with the person seeking asylum. It's to do with the Home Office not being able to provide.
But how would you decide? A man turns up at Dover on a rubber dinghy. He's got no papers. He says to you, "I've just escaped Eritrea, where I'm going to be slaughtered because I am gay," or something like that. How do you prove, firstly, he's Eritrean? How do you prove his claim of his inevitable demise? How is that proven?
Okay, so
process?
There are various issues here, and you know, there's been lots of case law in the UK in relation to Eritrean and Ethiopian cases regarding individuals saying that they were Eritrean but they were actually Ethiopian. So they have linguistic analysis. They have, and not even that. We don't need to go to that level of inquiry, because they're asked questions by the Home Office, by their legal representatives in relation to their knowledge of customs and geography of the state. So that's pretty easy. In relation to the second element regarding risk on return because they're gay, well, as you know, I specialise in LGBT plus cases, and I created a model in 2011, which is used by the Home Office since 2014, used globally and internationally, where there's no need for corroborative evidence, and we listen to the evidence of the individual. So on both elements,
you just believe somebody when they say it. Is that the?
We do that in all walks of life, in criminal trials and civil trials. That's what we do. We listen to the evidence and we look at corroborative
some might say that when
evidence which supports the claim.
But something as seismic as, you know, becoming a citizen in another country, you might think that would require a little bit more than just a nod of the head and a bit of gentle agreement.
Well, with the greatest respect, that's not what... Sorry, I keep on saying with the greatest respect. I apologise, Ian.
No, you don't have to have any respect. It's fine.
Absolutely. Well, it's good to deal with people with respect. But the issue here is that by becoming a refugee, you don't automatically become a citizen. We now know that under the bill, which is currently being debated in the House of Lords on the committee stage, there's a two-track process for those who go to safe routes and what the Secretary of State calls illegal routes. So it's not illegal to claim asylum in the UK. But importantly in this issue, it's not an automatic citizenship. At the moment, the law is 5 years leave to remain. You have your 5 years and you apply for settlement indefinitely to remain, and only after that do you apply for citizenship. And it is really
it gives you, it is, well, you say that, but I mean, you've kind of suggested in your own answer that although it might be lengthy, it's not actually particularly complicated.
It is very complicated. When you look through these asylum procedures and the processes and the delay incumbent in the system, I mean, the main issue, I mean, if we look at the claim for refugee status, you know, these refugees are come into the country, they claim asylum, they have to be processed through the asylum system. There are significant delays. There's very little legal aid, if at all, available because of the limited number of legal aid providers. And there's significant delays between claiming asylum and having your asylum claim, you know, even having the interview before it's actually determined. So we're looking at many years where the individuals are not allowed to work unless, of course, the decision takes over a year. That's another complicated issue. So there's lengthy delays where the majority have suffered some sort of persecution and harm and trauma. So they have mental health issues as well. So it's not the type of process you and I would want to go through. It's quite chilling. And with the new procedures, sorry, that's one of my dogs barking in the background.
It's all right. No, I assume that.
Well, he's called Veritas, so the Latins of truth. So clearly he's barking the truth of my statements. But the issue here is it's not...
only a left-wing lawyer would name their dog that, right?
Well, I went to Harvard, so Harvard's motto was Veritas. So the other dog's called Nomos, which is Greek.
Fair point. Okay. But look, listen, I mean, the bottom line here is whatever way we slice this, it may be lengthy, it may be, in many respects, in certainly from your perspective as a lawyer acting on behalf of people, it may be unacceptable. But to other people looking at this figure, £5 million a day, does seem to be an extraordinary amount to spend on people when you can never fully guarantee that somebody is escaping a tyrannical regime. Ultimately, you have their word for it.
Okay, ultimately, we have the Home Office's word in relation to the figures. You've only just announced those figures. We don't know the devil in the detail in relation to those figures. And as I said, the 12,000 Afghan refugees in hostels, they shouldn't be in hostels. They should actually be granted refugee status. So let's look at the detail. And when you say absolutely be sure, we're never absolutely sure of anything. There's no 100% guarantee. But noting the Home Office's own figures from August last year, we know that the majority of individuals who come to the UK to claim asylum are either granted at first instance by the Home Office or are independent judges find that they are entitled refugee status or some sort of leave to remain. That's what we call the rule of law.
Indeed.
And that's the one great thing we have.
I understand that. But when I visited the jungle in Calais a few years ago and I spoke to mostly Iranian at the time, you may remember there was a huge proportion of Iranian nationals claiming asylum, a country we're not at war with. It might be a bit of a ropey regime over there, but we're not at war with. These weren't guys, these were very talkative, very decent people. I don't think they were coming over to steal our wives or our houses.
Last week, to the upper tribunal, our appellant chamber of the Immigration Asylum Chamber, which decides the big cases, did they hand down a very important judgment regarding risk to people who go on social media and Facebook who write statements against the Iranian regime. And they accept that those individuals will be at real risk of persecution. So our appellate
we don't
in the
know
upper
if they are
tribunal accept that the country conditions in Iran mean that you will be persecuted.
But leaving a country you don't like, I don't dispute that, but you don't know that every person that turns up at Calais has been the potential victim of that law.
And that's why you assess the claim. But
how would you ever distinguish?
The point is, Ian, if we're looking at a rogue state such as Iran, who will persecute you just for writing a Facebook post against the Iranian regime, then you can imagine the wide spectrum of refugees who come from Iran. That's a fact.
But because you don't like the country you live in is not a good reason for asylum, is it? But it's certainly the one
because you'll be taught. We know what happens with the British-Iranian refugees, Iranian-British, who are currently prisoners in Iran. Yeah, we know that they've been imprisoned on false charges. We know the conditions they are in those prisons, even prison, the most tyrannical, torturous prison. We know that they are detained and they're tortured under false charges. So we know what the facts of the system is. We're very much comfortable in our bubble. You're clearly comfortable in your bubble, in your studio in London. But the rest of the world isn't so kind. And that's what we recognise, that the UK, the British public, support that refugees must be accepted and being given safety.
Hello, this is Clashes of the Week here on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Still to come.
But, order. To help me, to help the House, you withdrawn your earlier comment and replaced it with inadvertently.
Not my fault if the Prime Minister can't be trusted to tell the truth.
Under the power given to me by Standing Order number 43, I order the honourable member to withdraw immediately from the House.
Order, order, yes, that's right. For the first time, a clash that isn't Talk Radio's fault. Yep, we've started importing our clashes, well, for this week. This time it's from the House of Commons. Also,
the FDA have just released today the fact that natural immunity is 5 times stronger than vaccine-induced immunity.
But that doesn't mean the vaccine on top isn't very important. That's not
sorry,
the same thing.
hang on.
And also, I'm not
I don't
saying
think that's true. That is not true what you said.
No, that's
take the vaccine.
Take
the vaccine. No, I don't think it is. Take the vaccine.
oh, please, I can't stand it anymore. Make the conversation about vaccinations just disappear, please. This time Mr. Whale clashes with a certain Mr. Fox, and it's not that fantastic either. All that and more on Clashes of the Week. But first, you'll be delighted to hear that we haven't forgotten about the subject of Partygate. Or will you? Turns out that quite a few people are getting a bit irate at the way we, at the home of common sense, are trying to call out the government for breaking their own rules. Mike Graham brought this up recently, again, when he opened the phone lines. And wouldn't you know it, caller Stephen in Burnley wasn't terribly happy about all of the Boris bashing we're doing. Or should that be the bashes Boris is doing? Let's find out, shall we?
Hi, Mike. Yes, I'm fine. To be honest, Richard in Manchester said quite a lot of what I was going to say to you. He did it quite well. But seriously, I mean, you and Julia, you're carrying on about the Boris thing, the Partygate thing. I mean, who cares? I mean, I know you say...
Well, it's not the only thing that we talk about, Stephen.
I know, otherwise I won't listen to you.
No, but it's not the only thing we talk about with regard to Boris Johnson either, and I keep continually saying, till I'm blue in the face, it's not really, I don't really care about the cake or the parties or the wine and the cheese. I care about what is actually going on. And there's not much going on that I can see that people who would like to see a Conservative government succeeding in is happening. It's not happening, is it?
Well, no, but then again, there has been a pandemic.
Well, no, but that didn't stop him being massively interested and pushing out all sorts of legislation about the green economy, did it? Didn't stop him organising COP26. Didn't stop him making sure that we still have a green tax on all of our energy bills. And it didn't stop him making sure that we are told that we must be greener.
Here we go. You're never wrong, are you?
Well, I'm not. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. What's the one thing? What's the one thing, Stephen, that Boris did during the pandemic that wasn't pandemic related? It was pushing the green agenda.
Which I don't agree with. I didn't vote for him to do that. I mean, that's like liberals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't agree with that, why do you want him around?
Because he's still there, and I think he will. He's only had 2 years, and there's been a pandemic. There's all the other stuff going on. This Partygate, I think, is just it's a red herring.
Well, it's a red herring that he brought upon him. He brought it upon himself, Stephen.
I kept to the rules, and I'm sure a lot of people did.
Yeah.
But I don't care that he didn't.
Why?
Or inadvertently.
Why don't you care that he didn't?
Because he's there for more things than that.
So you think there should be a list of exemptions then for people that don't have to abide by the law? Is that right?
Well, yeah, I'll let the Queen get away with stuff.
Well, the Queen didn't get away with it, though, did she? The Queen sat on her own at her husband's funeral, because when they said you can have a proper funeral if you want because you're the Queen, she said, no, I think that would be the wrong thing to do. And that's why the Queen is a brilliant leader and why he isn't.
Okay, probably wrong thing to say. I've got a couple of children off of her anyway. So
yeah, but the point is this, Stephen. Listen, I understand that some people think Boris Johnson is a winner and a brilliant guy and all of that. But unfortunately, the longer it goes on, the less likely that appears to be.
only because you're acting like the mainstream media.
No, I'm not. No, I find that a real insult, Stephen, actually. You know, I do everything with the best intentions. No, wait a second. I do everything with the best intentions, right? I call out things when I think that they're wrong. And just because I supposedly support Boris Johnson in one sense doesn't mean that I support him in every sense. And when he gets it wrong, I'm going to say so. And he's got this massively wrong.
No, I agree with that, but just it's constantly you're doing it.
No, it's not constantly.
The last couple of weeks.
It's not constantly. No,
every morning.
Well, Stephen, because it's called news. You know, are you going to tell me that you think we should be ignoring it because you don't like it?
No, it's not that I don't like it. I just think there's other things that you should be concentrating on rather than what the mainstream media are doing,
what?
which is this.
Well, so when they have a 2-hour session in Parliament where Ian Blackford from the SNP gets thrown out.
An idiot anyway,
well, he is, but you don't think we should bother with that?
Well, no, I don't. I don't know why I ring you, to be honest, because I know you're never wrong.
Well, I'm not. That's the one right thing you've said. So well done.
Thanks
so,
a lot.
I mean, you know, you get kudos for that. But, you know, what else should we be talking about that we're not talking about? We talk about everything.
The Ukraine.
We talk about Ukraine.
Well, I'm more concerned about that, to be honest.
Well, did you listen to my interview with Bill Wiggin this morning?
Yes, I listened to that.
Did we talk about Ukraine?
Yes.
So what's the problem?
Yeah, okay, but you can't win with you.
Well, I'm just pointing out that you're saying we don't talk about Ukraine. We do.
I knew you'd wipe the floor with me, but look...
It's not about that, Stephen. I just want to know what you want us to talk about that we're not talking about.
Party, I don't want you to keep going on about Partygate. Let the guy...
We don't keep going on about it.
He's had 2 years as a Prime Minister. Give him a bit more time. He needs 4, 5 years.
What does he need time for? Why does he keep promising through Pretti Patel to stop migrants arriving on our beaches and then does nothing about it? You heard an earlier caller. 7,000 people came in January, right? This is supposed to be the new crackdown.
Yeah, true.
We talk about that. He hasn't done anything about that. He's putting your taxes up in April. What about that? You think that's a good idea?
Well, I'm a pensioner now, so it's not going to affect me. But yeah, I understand.
Well, it might affect your children. If you have any, it might affect your younger members of your family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, it's not just about Partygate. The point about Boris Johnson is that he has brought all of this on himself, right? He doesn't wish to admit to it. He doesn't really think he's done anything wrong. And he thinks if he keeps the wool over everybody's eyes for long enough, people will all think the way you do and think it's not important. Well, it is important.
Yeah.
He's running the country. I mean, what do you think Vladimir Putin is going to say to him when he meets him? Oh, hello, Boris. Fancy a bit of cheese and wine? He's just going to make fun of him, isn't he?
Yeah, well, which is what you're doing with me. Look,
I'm not. No, listen, I'm entertaining your thoughts and I'm letting you speak because that's what we do. But I'm not convinced by your argument, Stephen. I think just because you think that we're attacking him for no good reason doesn't mean that that's what we're doing.
I'm not saying it's no good reason. What I'm saying is don't keep going. We all get...
But, I mean, it's a bit like saying in the middle of the Gulf War, stop going about the Gulf War.
This is Talk Radio TV's Clashes of the Week. Now, who says that the Clashes of the Week can only feature moments on programmes from Talk Radio? Well, no one. And that's why arguably one of the best clashes to come out of the past week happened just up the river from where we are. Yes, that's right, it took place in the Palace of Westminster. Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, had to order the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford, to leave the chamber after accusing the Prime Minister of, quote, misleading the House. Personally, I think it led to one of the best moments seen in the Commons for a very long time. Let's relive it, shall we?
Wait for the report, we were told. That's right. Well, here it is, and it tells us very little, except it does state that there were failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10. It states that some events should not have been allowed to take place. That is the Prime Minister's responsibility. If there is any honour in public life, then he would resign. Where is this? And he laughs. And the Prime Minister laughs. We ought to remind ourselves in this House that 150,000 plus of our citizens have lost their lives. Family members that couldn't be with them. And that is the sight that people will remember. A Prime Minister laughing at our public. I extend the hand of friendship to all those that have sacrificed. I certainly do not extend the hand of friendship to the Prime Minister, who is no friend of mine. Where is the shame? Where is the dignity? Meanwhile, the police investigation will drag on and on. Every moment the Prime Minister stays, trust in government and the rule of law is ebbing away. The litany of rule-breaking, the culture of contempt, the utter disdain for the anguish felt by the public who have sacrificed so much. What the public see is a man who has debased the office of Prime Minister, shrinked responsibility, dogged accountability and blamed his staff at every turn, presided over sleaze and corruption and tainted the very institutions of the state. In short, Mr Speaker, this is a man... Well, they can laugh, but the public know. The public know this is a man they can no longer trust. He has been investigated by the police. He misled the House. He must now resign.
Order. You'll have to withdraw that last comment.
Mr Speaker, I gave the evidence of the 8th of December.
Order. You're going to have to withdraw misled.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has misled the House.
Unless you withdraw, I will have to stop, and that's not good. Just withdraw the words.
I am standing up for my constituents that know that this Prime Minister has lied and misled the House.
Give me the paper. Give me the paper. Inadvertently misled. I'll give you one more chance. As leader of the SNP, I don't want to have to throw you out. I'm going to give you this chance. Please.
Please to power. That man has misled the House.
Shut up. I'm sorry it's come to this, and I'm sorry that the leader of the party has not got the decency to just withdraw those words in order that this debate can be represented by all political leaders. Would you like to inadvertently?
Speaker, if the Prime Minister has inadvertently misled the House, then I will state that.
Right, we're going to leave it at that. Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for withdrawing what he just said, because he was wrong then, and he, I'm afraid, is wrong in his analysis. And I apologise, as I've said, for all the suffering that people have had throughout this pandemic, and for the anger that people feel about what has taken place in number 10 Downing Street. But I've got to tell the Right Honourable Gentleman that for much of what he said, his best course is simply to wait for the inquiry to be completed.
Can I just say, I take it the Honourable Member has withdrawn it, the Right Honourable Member.
That the Prime Minister may have inadvertently misled the House.
But, order. To help me, to help the House, you've withdrawn your earlier comment and replaced it with inadvertently.
It's not my fault if the Prime Minister can't be trusted to tell the truth.
Under the power given to me by Standing Order number 43, I order the Honourable Member to withdraw immediately from the House. From the House. It's all right, we don't need to bother. Right, let's just move on.
This is Clashes of the Week on Talk Radio TV with me, Phil Dave. Now, the debate about mask effectiveness continues to rumble on. Do they, or don't they, help stop the spread? Various supermarkets continue to ask their shoppers to wear them despite Plan B rules being relaxed. Well, this was brought up on The Breakfast Show recently with Jeremy Kyle when he spoke with Dr. Andrew Preston, a microbiologist and vaccines expert at the University of Bath, alongside Dr. Claire Craig, a diagnostic pathologist. Good heavens, that sounds like a great deal of intellect for that time of the morning, alongside Jeremy Kyle's, of course. Well, the question is, do masks, or as some people would have you believe, chin hammocks, actually work?
Andrew, if masks aren't worn, says Andrew, cases will rise again. Really?
Yeah, I honestly do think there will be a slight bump back. It'll be temporary, and then things will sort of continue in their natural course. Yeah, I do think that will be the case.
Well, listen, you two can talk about it because Dr. Claire Craig says masks do not work. Why do they not work, Claire?
If we just go back to that last point, you could almost add any phrase to that. You know, Let's all dance and cases will go up again. Let's not step on the cracks and cases will go up again. Of course, cases are going to go up again. It's not to do with the mask wearing. So yeah, masks don't work. And what's been really interesting about this debate is that people on my side of the debate have been quite clear for a long, long time that actually this virus is spread in aerosols, which are too small for the masks to have an impact on. And we've seen that in all the real world data where countries have put in mask restrictions. And often the effect has been the opposite of what was desired. But then what's been interesting is that people on the other side of the debate who've been very, very pro-mask, a lot of them have now taken the position that cloth masks do nothing and that people should wear fitted medical grade masks on that basis. So it's quite interesting when you've got your opponent agreeing with you.
Andrew, you're looking up to the sky, my friend. I mean, surely it's hospitalisations we need to worry about, isn't it? I mean, how does a mask work then? Tell us. Put it into layman's terms. Why does a mask help us?
A mask can help to trap some of the larger particles. I certainly take Claire's point about the size at which masks are effective, but I don't think all of the viral particles are necessarily in tiny aerosols. They're in a real range. So masks are just one small component. They're not the answer to anything, and they're certainly not 100%. But it's like many things that, the hand washing probably has some small effect. Social distancing, the distance over which you separate from people has a big effect.
Treat me, both of you, treat me as an uneducated layman, all right? Seriously. And there'll be people now texting and go, you are, right? Don't we just have to get on with our lives? It's a cold. Hospitalisations aren't on the rise. We're saying to kids, wear them in schools. We were. Lots of kids at schools need the facial expressions, the emotions to learn. I'm not criticising you, Andrew, but at what point are the scientists going to say enough is enough? It's a cold, man. I've had it. It's not going to kill me. I've been vaccinated. Can we get on with our lives? Why is there still this obsession to wear a mask? I don't get it.
I'm not sure there's an obsession to wearing it. No, I certainly agree. At some point, we say we've done everything that we possibly can. Well, that's the point. No one really knows when. And so the only concern at the moment is, compared to previous points of the pandemics, we still have very high case numbers. So it's just the argument, do we wait until they go down? But how long might that be? People honestly don't know. So I'm quite happy with people saying now it's up to an individual personal decision, and we go with it. Absolutely. There's very little more that we really can do. It's just a case of, do we wait for warmer weather if that ever comes? But no one can really say what the actual effect of going now compared with maybe going in these holidays will be. Absolutely. No one can say that.
Claire, the problem for me as well is it's become rather a militant issue, hasn't it? I mean, it's now, you do or you don't. I've seen over the last several months, I see people with masks and they're just like that. It's absolutely no point to them. It's almost like it's some sort of token gesture. Do you think we just have to get on with it now, or what?
I really do. I think we have to take a step back and say, hang on a second. If we hadn't had all of this COVID palaver that we've had for the last 2 years, and we were where we are now, right? So if it all started with Omicron, what would we make of it? Well, our ICU beds, a quarter of them are empty. That is unprecedented in January. We've got excess deaths that are below normal numbers. We would be talking about how quiet this winter has been in terms of respiratory viruses. Seriously, I'm serious. This has been an incredibly quiet year. And yet we're here because of what came before. We're here because of what you're saying about these other reasons people are wearing masks. They're wearing masks because it shows their politics. It shows their... Well, they believe...
All right, let's not talk about politics. Let's say that supermarkets are quite rightly a vital service and almost the whole of the community passes through. Dave, who produces the Drive Show and is here today, made a really good point the other day. He comes into work every day on the tube. He said, I think, personally, I'm always going to wear a mask on the tube because I can't believe how dirty and people sneezing and coughing and whatever. That's going to be his choice going forward. His choice. The problem with choice is... That's okay, but it becomes an issue. People are now looking at people who are wearing masks, Andrew and Claire. People are now making judgments. It should be individual, but it's not turning out like that, is it, Andrew? It's becoming an issue.
No, I do think we have a period of sort of trying to understand that it's not a judgment on other people. If I wear a mask, it's my own personal decision. I don't want to be judged, and I'm not judging anyone who doesn't want to wear a mask, because we're in that phase now. We've been asking people to stick to the regulations. That restriction has gone, so of course people are certainly at liberty to say, actually, I don't want to wear a mask. And I understand there are many occasions where, in schools with communications, it is a major issue. We've never found a restriction or a way to try and tap down on this virus that doesn't have other negative consequences. There isn't one.
I suspect what I'm going to say will go down like a lead balloon, but yesterday was Freedom Day and there was enough definitive proof that lots of people are still going to work from home. Now, without appearing cynical, there will be some people who've got used to that, right? And could be rightly criticised. I had a woman on yesterday saying, well, if I go back to work, some psychologist said, my desk might have been moved and I might not be able to deal with it. Maybe the same happens for people. They've got so indoctrinated with wearing a mask. Maybe at some point we need somebody in authority and knowledge to say, you don't need to do it. It doesn't make any difference. I'm not advocating. People can make their own decisions. What I'm against is it becomes, if you like, something that people are not sure what to do. For 2 years, we've had people saying we shouldn't. At the beginning, we were supposed to wash our hands. I've had somebody say to me on this show that stuff can come out the back of a mask and it's pointless. I've got no idea. I think we've changed the way we live. I think we've changed the way that we look at things, and I think that's a good thing. But what would be good is for everybody to, the same message to come, because it becomes political, and, whatever the answer to it is, it should... I hope people can just make the right decision from then. Do you ever see it ending, Claire? Very quickly, 10 seconds.
I think what you've said is pertinent. It has to be ended from the top. It won't be ended by people carrying on like this, because people are wearing them as safety blankets. Children, drama teachers are saying they're finding it hard to get them to take them off and speak because they're hiding behind them.
But also, if we've had for 2 years people suggesting that if you don't wear a face mask, you're going to die or you can contribute to other people's death, that's also relevant.
This is Talk Radio TV's Clashes of the Week. Now, when it comes to those who are anti-vaccination, arguably one of the forerunners has to be actor turned political pundit Laurence Fox. He joined James Whale and Ash recently to discuss, oh, come on, really? Yup, the vaccination. Laurence has said this week that he recently contracted COVID and equated it to a bad flu. That old chestnut. Well, to be fair, that was indeed my experience. But then again, I'm not the one suggesting that people shouldn't get vaccinated. In fact, quite the contrary. Anyway, I digress. Let's just say I don't think that James was that impressed by what he thought.
A well-known political pundit, but I want him to go back to acting. Because I think we are losing a great star. Possibly could have been a James Bond, or could be a James Bond of the future.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And Equity, who sort of cancel him, should be ashamed of themselves. Bunch of stupid prats.
I thought they didn't have much power now. It's because of the old cancel culture, not because of Equity. Because of what they did
the BBC. ITV, it's a lot of this mainstream media.
Look at Sharon Osbourne in America. You compare that with Whoopi Goldberg.
Extremely left wing. Yeah. I can't believe some of the news bulletins. Anyway, we're talking about the subject I should never have started it. I think it would be good for the whole of the world. This is an appalling disease if you get it in a bad way. I've got quite a few tumours in one of my lungs. I really don't want to get it. But, c'est la vie, I'm afraid.
I've just checked on the BMJ website, and the UK Health Secretary Agency says you're 8 times more likely to be hospitalised if you're unvaccinated.
Yeah, but the point is that I'm not frightened of dying, but I am not religious, and I think a lot of religions are dangerous. I don't mind. I don't have a problem, Laurence. Yeah. Anybody can follow any religion they like, as long as they don't think that their religion takes presidency over my wish to be a secular human being.
Well,
that's where I think I would have put it.
I think that's the whole point of religion, which is that your relationship with your deity is about you and your deity. It's not about your relationship with other people, other than that you apply your relationship with your deity to other people. So it's do unto others as you would do unto others.
Could we remove the Church of England? Do we need a church of the country? I mean, is that necessary?
I find the whole idea of the Archbishop of Canterbury interviewing Tony Blair, one of the over moral ethics, one of the most. I thought it was a parody when I woke up this morning and saw that. So my views on organised religion are bad. But within the Bible, it says that when you gather in my name, gather in twos or threes, and the two would be you and me, and the third would be God. And I think the message of Christianity, certainly, and I'm sure of other religions as well, I don't know, which is to love thy neighbour and to allow thy neighbour to make his own mistakes or not.
I mean, just so you know, Laurence, so you know, my brother is a born-again Christian.
I'm not a born again anything. I'm just saying to me to live in a free, liberal, Western democratic society, which we have to pretend, or not pretend actually, assert is better than to live in a theocratic, appalling regime like you get in places like Libya and Iran. I think we're doing better. So I would just say one of the key vestments of Western liberal democracy is to turn around and say, what I am in charge of what goes in my body. So, for example, James, if you choose to take chemotherapy, there are some people. I think Steve Jobs, for example, refused to take.
He regretted that.
Yeah, and I'm sure he regrets it.
As do people in intensive care who were unvaccinated. They always regret. I wish I had got vaccinated.
Can I just say one? Hang on. Can I just put one thing about the democracy?
They don't go. I'm glad I wasn't, and I'm in intensive.
I mean, I'm glad I'm unvaccinated.
You wouldn't probably say that if you went to intensive care.
Well, I also I wouldn't say that if I said I wish I hadn't crossed the road and got run over by a bus, would I? So it's like it's horses for courses.
It's totally up to you what you do with your body. And so it should be, unless. It begins to affect everybody else. And if so many people didn't take the vaccine, it was then found out, this is hypothetical, and then it was found out that they were actually keeping they weren't very ill, it didn't affect them very badly, but they were keeping the virus going because they didn't get vaccinated. If that was found to be the case, would you then take it?
100%. And also, okay. I am very, very motivated towards looking after my fellow man.
But your analogy is like crossing the road without following the green cross code. You're not looking both ways or listening. You're just going for it and saying you're safe. That's the same as being unvaccinated.
What I'm doing actually is, if we're going to apply a highway code analogy to this, is mirror signal manoeuvre. So
you're the driver.
I'm going, I'm going to check in the mirror. I'm going to check it's safe.
No, but you said crossing the road. You said about crossing the road.
Yeah, but we're talking about the highway.
I'm talking about what you're doing is not following. You're just going, I'll be safe crossing the road without looking both ways.
Well, I am going to be safe crossing the road. There is no one size fits all. Yeah, but there is no one size fits all.
What will you
remedy?
Tell that to the green cross code, man.
Guys, please. I know everybody is absolutely desperate that we start yelling at each other, swearing at each other, and
everyone's free to do it if they want. If they're not,
I need to be paid more. I just like to swear and shout at the people who ask for it. And Laurence and I get on okay, and we're having a civilised conversation about it. Yeah. But if Laurence had started having a go at me, or I'd had a go at him, I probably would not behave in the same way. This
is how you do open debate. No one has to get cancelled or anything, does it? You know what I mean?
No. Yeah. But, there are lots of people, once you disagree with them, get really upset and say, you're not letting me put my point out, and I'm trying to get right to it. The point also is, I think...
What would you like, James, to happen? So if you just say to me, this is what I would like to happen, Laurence, do you agree?
Okay. And
so what would you look... Okay, cool.
I would like people who don't want to have the vaccine to carry on, not to go on about it, but to... If that's what they really don't want to have that because they believe it'll mess them up, or even some of the stupider ideas that it's a way of tracking you and the government are keeping an eye on you. Or somebody else the other day said to me, you do realise you're going to die in a couple of years. They're trying to use this to cut down. I mean, there are so many stupid ideas which some people do believe. But
you're not answering my question.
I am answering your question. I'm answering your question. I'm doing it like a politician, but I'm answering your question. I would be quite happy with that. But people who haven't been vaccinated will have to accept there are some things that they probably won't be able to do. There probably will be countries that say, we don't want you in unless you've been vaccinated. There may well be airlines who says, no, we don't want you in sort of close proximity with people in an aeroplane if you haven't been vaccinated. And I think that has to be respected. I don't smoke.
Sorry to interrupt you again.
Go on.
How does that reconcile with the fact that it's proven that the vaccine doesn't prevent transmission and doesn't prevent infection? So we're holding on to this.
It lowers it, though, doesn't it?
It lowers it. But also,
but then I can come straight back to you and argue to you about natural immunity, which I now have.
But both is better. Both is better, isn't it? That and.
But you don't natural immunity. Yeah, both is a lot better. Both is. I wish we could have. Yeah, no, it is better.
You're stating this like it's fact.
Well, this is what we've been told by our scientists.
Only because the same question we asked the scientist the other day,
all the time,
and I'm telling you what he said, and I should have got him on the program with us at some point.
The FDA just released today the fact that natural immunity is 5 times stronger than vaccine-induced immunity.
But that doesn't mean the vaccine on top isn't very
important.
That's not
sorry,
the same thing.
Hang on.
And also, I'm not.
I don't think that's
that
true. That is not true. What you said.
No, that's
take the vaccine. Take the vaccine. No, I don't think it is. Take the vaccine, and you're going to be better off if you get this. All we're doing at the moment is so many people who are a minority. After all, remember this is there's a lot of them, but it's a minority, and they're trying to impose. Yeah, but well, if you think there's a couple of million people against it, and there's sort of 50 or 60 million who have had it, then it's actually a minority, and
I'd say between 10 and 20 million have not had the vaccine. Hence why Sajid Javid has turned around and he's completely withdrawn his thing. Now, look, if Sajid Javid,
I think that's appalling.
Well, Omicron's not as bad. That's why.
But hang on, guys. Let's just do this logically.
This is Talk Radio TV's Clashes of the Week with me, Phil Dave. It's been a bit of a busy old week for our Mr. Collins because in a third visit we learn that the proportion of crimes prosecuted in England and Wales dropped to a low of just 6%. The Home Office figures were published recently and it showed that a number of violent offences, including robbery, theft and criminal damage resulting in charges, had also fallen. Well, this was discussed on Ian Collins' show in the past few days. He spoke with Chris Daw QC, a lawyer, author and broadcaster. Looks like a slap-on-the-wrist attitude isn't going so well for fighting crime. Who knew?
These are grim. 6% is shameful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with these figures is that, you know, you're lumping together virtually every crime into one go. But what is obvious from the figures is that our criminal justice system, from the police through to the courts, through to the prisons, just can't cope with the sheer volume of crime. And that's hardly surprising because, you know, the number of police officers is massively lower than it was a decade ago. The number of, even the number of magistrates' courts has been cut, the number of Crown Court sitting days, number of lawyers. So if you cut all of the parts of the system that are needed to process people who have been charged, then it's not surprising that not many get charged. I mean, the most saddening and worrying statistic of all, as you rightly point out, is the vast increase in the number of reports of rape. Over 60,000 rapes reported in our country in the 12 months that we're dealing with here. That's a truly shocking number. Yeah. And when you think, I mean, what it takes for someone to have the courage to go to the police in the first place and report something like that, and to see just hundreds of them result in any form of criminal action, I think that for me is the most shocking statistic amongst these many shocking statistics. And if we do nothing else as a result of this, we have to look to protect people who are the victims of the most serious violent and sexual crime.
Is this just about numbers, Chris? Is this just about the number of officers or those that work in the various elements of the legal conveyor belt, as it were? Are there other reasons, do you think, afoot here?
No, that's the main reason, because, I work in this area, as you know, and I act for people who are under investigation for some of these crimes, including rape. And I've seen cases where the police just have so many per officer. So one officer could be dealing with 50, 60 or 70 different complaints of rape at the same time. Now, just imagine how much work is involved in interviewing the victim and taking all of the evidence involved and speaking to other witnesses. If you think about it, it's absolutely impossible for a police officer to do justice to every single person. So in that respect, it is absolutely a numbers game. You can't get away from the fact that to deal with a rape victim, to do all of the steps necessary, takes hours and hours and days of time. There's no way around any of that. So if you don't have enough police officers, this is the price you pay for it.
Are agitating left-wing lawyers like yourself a problem as well, do you think, Chris?
Well, A, I'm not left-wing, and B, I don't think I agitate, Ian. I come on your show every month.
Of course you agitate. You're a barrister. Of course you agitate. That's in your blood, isn't it?
I don't agitate. My job is to advocate, and I do that by speaking the truth. And the truth of it is that there is no other explanation for the dramatic increase in crime and the dramatic reduction in the solving of crime than the fact that our criminal justice system just doesn't have the people, the resources, or even the technological resources. I mean, even things like getting mobile phones downloaded from, suspects who have been arrested for some of these crimes. The queue to get those phones downloaded could be months and months and months. And in the meantime, that person's on bail or at liberty, and they often, I have to say, go out to commit further violent crimes. So, we're letting down victims, but we're making a choice. We've chosen to elect governments time after time who don't prioritise criminal justice, who strip all of the resources away, who get rid of police officers, and unsurprisingly, we're paying that price.
But also, OK, you're not a left-wing lawyer, you're a defence lawyer, and there is, perhaps, and I say this kindly, something in the Venn diagram that might show that little grey area where the two cross together, but you do agitate to get bad people off charges, right? I mean, that's partly what you do.
No, I think that's an unfair way to describe what we do.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Well, but anybody who knows anything about criminal justice, surely everyone, including you, would agree that if you're accused of a crime, then you've got to have someone to defend you. There is a prosecution whose job is to try to win the case and advocate for the prosecution side. Yeah. And if you follow the logic through, well, I'm some sort of left-wing agitator.
Yes, but if you've got a client, look, and let's take it to the next stage where they have been charged, and you're on the phone to the CPS going, you might not want to follow this one through. He's a good guy, good character generally, and throw everything you can at it to try and get it dropped. That is your job, right?
Absolutely. Of course it's my job. And it's unambiguous. I have a professional obligation to fearlessly defend my clients within the law, within the rules, to the best of my ability. And if we didn't have defence lawyers who did that, we'd be in a right mess.
Don't you feel guilty, though, Chris, getting people off on a technicality, which is often what the case is?
Ian, it's never the case that I get people off on what you call a technicality. What most people describe as technicalities are the law of the land that's been passed by Parliament in our democratic society.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, Chris, if a police officer forgot to fill out a specific form at a certain toll within a certain time, a case can collapse because of those technicalities.
Only very minor road traffic and offences of that kind would ever collapse because of a technicality of that kind. A murder case or a rape case doesn't collapse because of a form not being filled in correctly. I mean, that just would never happen in our system. So you are talking, yes, of course, there have to be rules about how long that you have to issue a parking ticket or a speeding ticket and so on. Otherwise, it could just go on forever. So there are rules around those things, but none of those apply to any serious crime.
So would we agree then, Chris, that we need just lots more, we need more court time, we need more magistrates? Only this week they were advertising pretty much. So, do you want to become a magistrate? We need more police officers. Then we can really start the process of locking the bad guys up.
Yeah, because the other thing we need to do is look at all the people we lock up who are not bad guys in the worst sense of the word, who are not violent.
Hang on, you're not on that. Do you ever let that one go, Chris?
No, well, I don't.
We're locking up we lock up bad people, not good people.
We don't just lock up bad people. We often lock up people with very serious psychiatric problems.
I don't dispute
and addictions, untreated.
That doesn't mean you don't need locking up, right?
No,
I mean, Hannibal Lecter needed locking up. He had a lot of psychiatric issues.
Yeah, but the majority of those with those problems in our prison system belong in hospital environments, or they belong in some other therapeutic environment. And if we put them in the right places where they could get treatment, they wouldn't keep committing crimes, and we'd have the resources in the form of the police. At the moment, the police spend half their time mopping up for the lack of psychiatric services. People with serious psychoses on the street because there's no proper hospitals, there's no care for them, and the police end up arresting them for something minor, and they end up in prison. And that's why our prisons are so full, and that's why the police have got so little time to deal with the crimes that really harm people, that hurt them physically, or burglaries, as you mentioned. I mean, God knows how the Mets found the time to go and investigate Partygate and put some of their best people on that, when most of your listeners who have ever been burgled will have the experience that the police don't turn up, and if they do, no one gets charged for it. So what the public want, I think, is they want the police to do the things and to solve the crimes and to address the problems that cause the most damage to us as ordinary people walking the streets or living in our homes and wanting to be safe. At the moment, we don't have the resources to do that, and crime is out of control.
On a separate point, Chris, just while you're on, you know the law, this is your world, it's in your DNA, etc. I'm not a lawyer. I'm looking at this Gray report. Well, in fact, I'm not looking at the Gray report. Nobody's looked at the Gray report, of course, because it's elusive. It's sort of disappeared as if it never existed. At some point next week, I'm expecting somebody to say, what Gray report? That was never a thing. It's not appeared. We now know there's some kind of controversy around apparently the Metropolitan Police saying to, one assumes, Sue Gray and those behind it, be careful about references you make to police action. The last time I looked, any police action would not involve a criminal trial. There would be no jury there. There would be no sub judice issues. So what the hell is going on?
Well, you tell me, Ian. And the Met have really caused a political storm here, haven't they? Because we started off with the Met saying in December, we're not going to investigate this at all because it took place a long time ago and we don't investigate historical COVID breaches. Then the next thing we hear is that the Met are investigating, but they have no objection to the full publication of Sue Gray's report because there can't be any prejudice because, as you rightly point out, this is not even a criminal investigation. It's an investigation into breaches of the COVID regulations, which are a sort of a regulatory penalty, which can only result in a £200 fixed penalty for a first offence. So there's absolutely no risk of prejudice. But then, lo and behold, just as the country rightly is expecting to see the detail of what was going on in our name at number 10 during lockdown, somehow or other the Met have put a spanner in the works. Now, from a legal point of view, obviously I don't know the detail, but I can tell you this, there is no legal provision, no law written down that says that the government cannot publish this report in full because there's no contempt of court issue. As you rightly point out, there can't be a jury trial. There can't even be a trial at all. Because, as I say, it's not a criminal offence.
Indeed.
And so it seems to me that the only thing the Met could be considering is if all the evidence is released, all the statements and reports of who Sue Gray has spoken to, there may be a concern that will allow people who have yet to be interviewed to have a advance warning of everything that's being said and give them the chance, as it were, to make up their defence in advance. I mean, that's a risk that applies. But for me, the public interest in this issue, and I don't just mean we're interested in it, I mean the intrinsic public interest in knowing what our government are doing at the time that the Prime Minister is staring down the camera lens at all of us, telling us what to do and what not to do back in 2020 and 21. The public interest in transparency and openness is overwhelming. Let the whole report come out and let's judge for ourselves.
Chris Daw QC speaking to Ian Collins. And that's it for this edition of Clashes of the Week. From me, Phil Dave, thank you for the pleasure of your company. And make sure you stay tuned to the home of common sense. Of course, this is Talk Radio TV.
Good talk. Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio. Listen on your smart speaker. Watch it live on your smart TV. The world headquarters of common sense. Talk Radio.